if you want to talk to any of our panel or all of our panel here on Cross Question. Let's start with a question on a text from Julie in Enfield, who says, what do you make of the comments by Rebecca Long-Bailey today about her not having any Tory friends and and being very angry if any of her friends had voted Tory? Is that the role of a political leader? Shaun Bailey.
For me, the short answer is no, isn't it? I think politics is the art of the possible, and it has to be possible to listen to people who don't share your views. That's how you build consensus. That's how you learn things. I think saying stuff like that just demonstrates to people that you're not going to be someone that can bargain on their behalf. Imagine she won this, she's going to have to deal with people who don't have her views. She's demonstrated that she's not even interested in listening to them. To me, it seems like a slightly ridiculous.
You don't have to be friends with someone to listen to.
Yeah, but the manner of these comments and the way in which she said that is saying that, listen, I spend a lot of time listening to people who are not my friends. That's not the point. The point is I'm willing to listen to anyone. And I don't arrive in a situation thinking, well, if you don't sound or look right, we can't have a conversation. It's just not helpful, is it?
Steve Bloomfield from Prospect Magazine.
I think let's be careful about what she actually said. My understanding what she said was that she said she had no Tory friends in Parliament. So it's not quite the same as saying that none of her actual friends are Tories. But I do think there is an issue, as Shaun says, in terms of if you are going to be the leader of a political party that wants to win power, then you need to be able to speak to the country and appeal to people from around the country. And one of the challenges Labour has had over the past few years is that it hasn't been very good at persuading people who have voted Conservative in the past to vote Labour. Now, that's something that Tony Blair was very good at, and it's something, conversely, that David Cameron was very good at persuading people who had previously voted Labour and certainly Lib Dem to take a punt on him. So there is an issue within the Labour Party at the moment that is obviously very, very focused on itself. And I imagine that whoever wins the leadership in the end is going to, once they have that mandate, start thinking about how they talk to the country. If you go back to the Tory leadership campaign, last year, there are a lot of things that the candidates said that were speaking very much to the people that they needed votes from right then. And then once Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, he started talking a bit more to the rest of the country. I think whoever emerges from this might do that too.
Shabnam Nasimi, what do you think about this? Do you have many friends outside the Conservative circles?
I do, and I think, look, I don't think a leader behaves or acts in such a way. You need, particularly if you're working in Parliament, to be leader of an opposition political party, you need to have the support of your fellow colleagues, because that's the way to get policies and certain agendas through. And more importantly, 43% of the country has now voted Conservative. By saying that you don't have any Conservative friends, or if your friends voted Conservative, which many historically Labour voters have, you're isolating a big bunch of the British population. And frankly, it doesn't seem like the Labour Party have learned anything from this election. They're still playing with divisive politics, isolating a large proportion of the British population. It's not the way to win.
But if she had said, I've got lots of friends on the Tory benches, I shoot the breeze with Jacob Rees-Mogg every evening, that wouldn't have done much good with her selectorate, which, her main support is coming from the Corbyn wing of the Labour Party, isn't it?
Well, look, I don't think that's what I'm not emphasising that she needed to say that she's best friends with Jacob Rees-Mogg or any other Conservative MPs, but she could say that she has worked on certain agendas together with Conservatives on certain causes and certain campaigns to prove at least that she is a team player and she is willing to negotiate with different people with different opinions and different ideologies.
Trevor Phillips.
Well, I hadn't heard exactly what she said. I first heard she said she didn't have any Tory friends, and I thought to myself, well, how do you know? Actually, it's like...
Well, to be fair, she has kind of said that. I've got the quotes here. Asked if she had any Tory friends outside of politics, she says, I'm sure I have. I've got a group of friends who aren't political, who don't talk about politics, because you kind of don't talk about politics with your non-political friends. And I bet you they've not voted Labour all their lives, probably voted for all sorts of different people. Then she said, I think she was then asked about in politics, she says, I don't know. They wouldn't know. She says, they wouldn't tell me if they did, because I'd be angry. That's about whether if they'd voted Conservative. She was then asked if she had any Tory friends in politics and replied, not really, no, but I'm friendly to everyone.
Oh, well, that's a whole different story, isn't it?
Not
I mean,
quite.
well, it is. I mean, somebody says, my friends are my friends, and most of them I haven't got any idea how they vote. That's where most people in this country actually are. Now, the point about whether she has friends across the aisle is probably a slightly different question. I think it would be a good idea, if you're in Parliament, to make relationships across the aisle with all sorts of people. But let's bear in mind, one of the most famous things that anybody's ever said about being in the House of Commons is that your opponents are those behind you, i.e. those in your own party. Your opponents are those across from you, those in the other party. Your enemies are those behind you, those who are in your own party. And I suspect that what Rebecca Long-Bailey should be thinking about right now is the enemies within her own party. That's a more serious issue.
There's another
Shaun.
angle as well. It's the point that she's angry if they do that. I think one of the worst things about public life now is that you know, people can't have a different opinion from you and you get along with them. She's seeking to be the leader of that party. What is she saying to the youngest Labour activists who are just joining in? She's saying to them, you can't, I would be angry if you went another way.
Yeah, but I think if you're passionate about politics, then of course then you're going to be passionate about politics. And you might be annoyed with a friend if you passionately believe that the government's welfare cuts have been devastating to this country. Then if one of your friends says, well, actually, I voted Tory, then you might be angry with them. No, it doesn't mean you then don't become friends with them. You can just have like an argument with them.
There's two things here. I don't believe you have the right to be angry with what somebody else's voting preferences are. That's their opinion. If someone said to you, Labour's handling of the economy up to now had been devastating to the country, but you still voted for them, I don't have the right to be angry with you. What I have the right is to a different opinion.
I don't know Rebecca Long-Bailey, but I suspect she probably didn't say that very seriously. I mean, most people, it's the sort of thing that you sometimes say as a throwaway.
Didn't she? When she said it, she was absolutely serious. She would not have a Tory as a friend.
But she's clearly mad as a fish, isn't she?
I wouldn't go that
she
far.
said again recently, I think, and I saw a clip on online where she said that she's happy that she doesn't have to be in the same room as Tories again. I mean, it's not sending a very good message, is it?
It's not a collegiate together message.
But but if we want to talk about Laura Pidcock, she did lose her seat, and it's possible that that she lost her seat partly because there were voters within her seat who were Conservatives and had perhaps considered voting Labour before, maybe have even voted for her before. Who then thought, actually, maybe not.
And there are probably Labour voters.
I think she's in a very different boat from what Rebecca Long-Bailey seems.
And there are probably Labour voters who listened to that and said, I might be a Labour voter, but I'm not voting for somebody who says things like that.
The one thing I will say in Rebecca Long-Bailey's defence, I'm in this position as well. You're given long interviews, you get clever people like Iain trying their best to catch you out. They see when you have an emotional window and in they dive. I don't suspect she said it out of any spite. I think she was just expressing the way she felt. My only thing is she's going for leadership. And a big part of being a leader of the Labour Party is the young people who will be following you and hanging on your every word. And she just needs to bear that in mind.
You've got to set an example. Yeah.
If I can make it a serious point, though, I think one of the things that's said about Donald Trump is that you need to take him seriously, not literally. And I think there's a tendency now in political commentary constantly to take every word that everybody says and parse it exactly as though it was written as a special essay. Well, people say things, and sometimes you have to just think, what is this person actually meaning? And I imagine what Rebecca Long-Bailey was trying to say is that I've got lots of friends from different kinds, but when I'm in politics, I am seriously on the other side from people who represent the Conservative interest. It's not how I do politics, but I don't think it's a sort of disreputable thing.
But I don't really buy this thing when she says, I don't talk politics with my non-political friends. I mean, I've got lots of non-political friends, but of course, what's the first thing they say to me when they see me? Oh, what's going to happen on Brexit, Iain? That's just what you do. Whatever's
Iain.
going on, and you might say my friends are sad, you may be right. none of them
Not
listening now.
everyone
I
is
hope.
talking about Brexit.
Yeah, not
No, well,
everyone's-
they're not.
and-
They're
and
not
also,
now. They're
yeah,
not now, but they were a couple of months ago.
I've got to say, Ian, I, like Rebecca Long Bailey, have friends who I like particularly because they don't talk politics.
Well, I agree, but there's usually politics raises its ugly head in most. If you have an hour-long conversation with somebody, unless you're just talking about sort of family issues or whatever, that, particularly in the past few years, it will come up. And I don't believe anybody, particularly when she's in the shadow cabinet, close ally of Jeremy Corbyn, I don't believe her when she says that she doesn't talk
the other thing
about
is,
politics
she
to
might
her
also
political friends.
But you can be a Brexiteer and be a Labour supporter, and you can be a Remainer and be a Tory.
Indeed.
You might also not want to talk about politics
There you
if you're
go.
Rebecca Long Bailey and
There you
you're
go.
hanging out with your friends.
Well, you're
If your
absolutely right. I
whole
have to
life is
say,
that.
if one of my friends, if that's the first question, my heart sinks because I don't want to talk politics when I'm not doing this.
I've got a friend listen to this now who lives in Leighton, and our friendship has become closer than ever because he guaranteed me we'll never talk politics. I spend all day, every day doing it.
Well-
I see him, we talk about other important things.
Shouldn't we be thinking more about what is she going to do?
Yeah.
As
Yes.
opposed to who her mates are, or you
Well, we
know.
may get a question on that a little bit later. You never know. 0345 6060 973. If you are Shaun's mate in Leighton and want to talk politics, that is the
Come on,
number.
Kudret.
That is the number. That is the number to call. It's 8:15.
This is LBC.
At UKME, our chauffeur service is 6-star. Just like the package we offer our drivers. Join the company that treats its drivers like VIPs. Apply today at ukme.co.uk.
If your dentures or loose and missing teeth make it hard to eat or make you self-conscious about your smile, TDC Smile in a Day dental implants could be the solution for you.
I smile. I'm a lot more confident. I don't have to talk with my hand over my mouth. If I'd have known the outcome and how it would have changed me, I just wish I'd gone to TDC years ago.
Let TDC restore your teeth, your smile, and your confidence. Book your free consultation. Visit smileinaday.co.uk or call TDC Harley Street on 0203 7334 986.
The birthday cake didn't arrive in time. The centerpieces never made it to the wedding. And by the time the brass band got to their concert, everyone had left. Breakdowns are rubbish, especially when you run a business. So when we make vans at Volkswagen, we make them as reliable as possible, which is why we've just won Most Reliable Van Maker at the Fleet News FN50 Awards. Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles, working with you. Visit Fleet News for full award criteria.
Cut out carbs, reduce your fat, eat 5 a day, stretch, breathe, sleep. Squeeze, juice, crush, mix, blend, supplements 10 shelves deep, 50 kinds of yoga, 100 fruity teas. Kale, buckwheat, turmeric, are they really all good for me? Ask family, friends, the internet. Why, when, where, what, who? My head is spinning, confusion reigns. I no longer have a clue.
Getting the right health advice matters. So every day in January, you'll find essential Daily Mail good health features you won't want to miss.
January is tough enough without a broken boiler. Keep your home warm and working this winter with 2 years interest-free credit and your boiler installed by one of our expert engineers. Plus, you'll get a 5-year British Gas warranty, and we can even quote by video call after work or on weekends. Get a quote by the 29th of February, and you can also get £200 off a new boiler, or £400 off for our existing home care customers. Search British Gas New Boiler. Conditions apply.
Hello, Sunny speaking.
Hi, Sunny. It's Alex. Is Steve free?
Steve, I have Alex on the line.
Put him through. Hi, Alex. Hello? Hello?
Fed up of a difficult-to-use phone system? Hi is an intuitive touchscreen business phone with removable tablet, centralised contacts and instant video to anyone. Stop saying
hello
and start saying
hi.
Visit hi.co.uk for more information.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's 18 minutes past 8 here on LBC. The number to call if you'd like to put a question to our panel is 0345 6060973. Let me reintroduce them to you. Steve Bloomfield is Deputy Editor at Prospect Magazine. Shaun Bailey is Conservative candidate for London Mayor. Trevor Phillips is Head of Civil Society? Am I getting this wrong?
I'm not
each
even
time?
that. I am Chairman of the Green Park Group, and I'm a Senior Fellow at Politics Change.
Right, OK, well, that'll do.
I actually do a job.
And Shabnam Nasimi is Conservative activist and Director of Conservative Friends of Afghanistan. Josh is a new caller in Portsmouth. Hello, Josh.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
So I just want to ask the panel, obviously, over the last few years, the Brexit word, which we're all fed up of, quite frankly. Do you think that politics has turned sour and they're all out for themselves and not for their parties? I'm not talking just individual parties, I'm about everybody. Because I just think it's a bit of a mess, to be honest with you.
And how would you like to see it rectified then?
Well, I think we need to hand some sort of power back to the people, not, general public, taxpayer.
Trevor Phillips, there's a lot of this feeling around that politics is in a mess. Politicians are in it for themselves. Is it any different to 20 years ago?
Well, in relation to politicians themselves, I don't think that's true. I don't think most of the politicians that I know are just there because, they just like being there. I mean, there are no doubt a few egotists there. There are no doubt a few people who think that they'll get something out of it. But most of the politicians I know are there because they want to make the world a better place. They disagree about how to do that, but most of them are there for that reason. And indeed, one of the reasons that some of them are, let's put it this way, mildly dangerous is that they absolutely believe that their answer is the only answer. So I don't think this whole idea that they're just there for personal gain makes any sense in my experience. I think something else has happened, though, and what Steve says is a really interesting thing, and particularly where he comes from. I think both here and in the United States, where I spend quite a lot of my time, politics feels like a mess because society, which used to be divided in a particular way, is now divided in a very different way. In the old days, my parents here worked in big factories. A lot of my family worked at Ford factory in Dagenham. There was an industrial class and there were owners, and it's pretty straightforward. You're working class, you're an owner, and so on. Today, things aren't quite like that. All of the big industries, coal, steel, mining, engineering, don't really exist. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, Labour lost a lot of seats in the last election. About, I think, something 50 or 60 of those seats, which represented towns that were like that, have changed hands because they no longer do that. And therefore, the people in them have different kinds of concerns. And I think the reason it feels confusing is that our country is changing quite dramatically. Economically, it's trending quite differently. It's very different socially. And politics is still racing to catch up. It feels confusing because the political parties, which were formed in a different era and represented a different sets of people, are now having to try to catch up with the real divisions in the country, which are more to do with, do you live in a big city or do you live in a small town, and so on.
Shabnam, do you think that we really appreciate the democracy we have in this country? You run Conservative Friends of Afghanistan. I mean, people in Afghanistan would think that they'd sort of gone to heaven if they had the kind of democratic system that we have. Do we take it for granted?
Of course. Britain is world leading when it comes to our sort of value, our British values, our democracy, our respect and tolerance for different ideologies and religions and freedom of speech. And it's not found very easily around the world. And particularly when it comes to ethnic minority communities, I think the challenge that I've seen working with grassroots communities across London is that the disconnect is less so with politicians going out into these getting into these positions for themselves, but more that the integration aspect is quite challenging. A lot of communities do not understand how the British political system works. They don't understand what a member of parliament's responsibilities or duties are. And so when you feel isolated or outside of the political bubble, that's when you feel like the system, the government, the democracy, you know, what's the use of it? What's the point of it? I don't have a say. I don't understand how it works. And that's when, again, people feel that the power isn't with them and it's with the political elite class. So I think a lot more work needs to be done in terms of helping people understand how the system works. But also, more importantly, and it is a long-term transition. It isn't something that will happen overnight, but helping people understand that they can be British and another, you know, and Muslim, for instance, or black or Asian or this and that, but demonstrating that British values and Britishness is not, is not an identity alone, and that it could fit with your culture and with your religion.
Steve Bloomfield, Prospect magazine is fairly, I would say, sort of intellectual at the top of the quality tree. But what do your readers tell you about this? Because I get this all the time with people phoning into the programme, and I kind of find myself defending politicians and saying, well, they're not all in it for themselves. Most politicians going for the right reasons. Yes, you might not like some of the things that they do, but they're not trying to deliberately sort of make you poorer or whatever. What do your readers say to you on this?
I think they share some of the frustrations that Josh shares about the mess, as he described it, that we're in at the moment. And I think part of the problem that we're facing at the moment is that the reason why politics feels like a bit of a mess is that we are divided on a lot of key issues. We just had, until the last election, we were in a hung parliament. You know, we had a government with a majority of -43 at one stage. So, of course, politics is going to feel like a bit of a mess because there are lots of competing views. We've been doing quite a lot of stuff over the last few months about the state of the British Constitution because we don't really have a written constitution. That in itself is a bit of a mess. And part of the challenge we've had over the past few months is all these different parts of the Constitution and of the system pushing against each other. So the Supreme Court, which has only been around 10 years, is trying to flex its muscles here. Parliament, realising that the executive don't have majority, is trying to flex its muscles there. But in some ways, if you were to design a democratic system that, as Josh was saying, brings power back to the people, it would look actually quite similar to this. You would have local councils, counties or towns or parishes that you elected leaders to. You would have a national parliament which you'd elect leaders to. You would devolve some power to the regions and to the cities. That's part of the system that we have at the moment. And the reason why lots of people are feeling it doesn't work is because we haven't had, until now, an era of big majorities in government where governments, it feels like people have been able to actually do things. We might now see, that there is a government that does lots of things, and you then hear a cry of, well, actually, the problem is the system works too well because they're able to do all these things, and I didn't like them, and I wasn't able to stop it. So they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, Shaun.
I think my take on it is halfway between the two. So I think we've had a real pace of change in this country, and some people are not comfortable with the change, and they've seen the Britain that they recognise just disappear in front of their eyes. And why politics feels like a mess, because a lot of politicians haven't responded to that. They've brushed those people under the carpet and said, if you have any worries, you're a racist. And people say, well, hold on a second, I was just asking a question about what will my community look like in the future, where will my place be? London is one of the most multicultural places on the planet Earth, and also historically as well. And that's important because sometimes in London we've had much greater comfort around that, where we are comfortable with that, and we've been pushing out messages that you must be comfortable as well. But have we brought people along with us? People have talked about for years multiculturalism, how great it is, and I'm a fan of mixing communities and the strength. That's certainly London's strength, but you've also got to bring people along in that conversation. And then when you put things on top of it like Brexit and immigration, all those things, that's just caused a panic for so many people. And I think one of the things that happened in Parliament is a promise was made and much of the country didn't see that promise delivered on, and that was broken. That's when people turned the guns on MPs and said, you said you would do something, what's the point of a referendum, blah, 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 blah. And then you got into that, and then you had this underlying thing of Britain is changing and nobody is talking us through the changes. And what's really interesting, I went to an event with young people, and there's a young black guy there, and he's a young black guy in the same way I am. He was born in this country, he's second generation. And he said, how comes I'm the only one in the room, and Shaun, who's proud to be British? Why we've lost our confidence around what it is to be British. And I think this country has lots to be proud of. And I think we need to return to the fact that we feel proud of who we are, what we've achieved in the world, and what we could do going forward. Okay. Anything from democracy to our love of difference. We need to promote that.
Trevor Phillips.
I think Shaun's onto something. I mean, if I have a criticism of our political and also our media class, it's that great politicians do a very particular thing. They explain. They tell us a story about who and where we are and where they want us to go. Thatcher had a very simple story. It was, there's too much power in the hands of government. There's probably too much power in the hands of trade unions. For us to prosper as a country and to feel better, we need to break down that power. And here's what I'm going to do. Blair turns up and he says, you know what, I think that our public services are run down. I'm going to put gazillions of money into it, and I'm going to make education and health better because that's what's wrong with this country. I think our problem at the moment is that we have a class of politicians who, frankly, are not that good at explaining. They're not very good at telling us a story.
That's Rebecca Long-Bailey's argument. She says, well, we had the right policies, but we just didn't communicate them well enough.
No. I don't think that's the same thing. She's just talking about, can you get the press releases out on time? What she's not doing, and what most don't do, is tell you, most people, for example, I was president of a big retailer for 4 years. What most of the people, the 85,000 people who worked with us are thinking about is, what's our country going to be like, and what's my work going to be like when we do not any longer have cashiers? Because that's what technology is bringing to us. Almost everybody in every part of this country, whether you work in a factory or you work, let's say, as a driver, driverless cars 5 years away, is thinking to themselves, what is our country going to be like when these things happen, and what should we be doing? And politics isn't even talking about that. I think one of the reasons that people are alienated from politicians is that they feel that politicians aren't doing the first basic thing, which is to say, this is what our country's like. This is where I think we're going right. This is where I think we need to do something different.
Right, very quickly, Shabnam.
I just wanted to stress that I do agree with Shaun that we do take our country for granted in many respects. I mean, patriotism, belief in our system seems to be, to many people now, seen as a wrong thing to say. You know, believing in our democracy, in our political structure, a government that is accountable to its people is not celebrated anymore, and we seem to be bashing our history and our culture.
Can I just say one thing as well, though? I think there's a fight between the press cadre and politics, and if you say anything, people punish you. You can't. I remember when they asked Frank Fields to think the unthinkable. If you ask the politician to do it now, the press would destroy them. You can't have a complicated conversation
because we're all say we in the media, we're all after a gotcha moment.
Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. But the point is,
I think it's true. There is pressure on broadcasters and indeed print journalists to get that viral clip, the gotcha moment that can be put on Facebook and people will watch for 90 seconds and think, ha, I got them. And I don't think that's healthy.
I don't. And as a politician, I could tell you something now. To say something meaningful, you often have to take a brave pill. And that shouldn't be the way. You should be able to have the tough conversation.
Have you become addicted to them?
I'm working on it.
Right, we'll have more questions to our panel in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 8:32. News headlines with Caroline Rundell.
The Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel to the Wuhan area of China after the outbreak of a respiratory illness. The strain of coronavirus has now killed 17 people. There are claims the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia hacked into the phone of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. It's said to have been done via a WhatsApp message. Members of Monty Python have been paying tribute to their co-star Terry Jones, who's died at the age of 77. The actor, writer and director was diagnosed with a form of dementia in 2015. LBC weather, mostly dry tonight with cloudy skies, lows of 4 degrees.
This is LBC.
The personal history of David Copperfield is now a BAFTA nominee and a winner of 5 BIFA awards, including Best Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor Hugh Laurie.
That's good to hear.
From the acclaimed director of The Death of Stalin.
What do we do with him? If I were you, I'd wash him.
Don't miss David Copperfield in cinemas Friday.
Ever dreamt of running your own business? It may be easier to achieve than you think. With a franchise, you start with a proven business model and the support of an established brand. Visit the British and International Franchise Exhibition on the 31st of January and the 1st of February at Olympia, London. Meet a wide range of franchise brands, benefit from expert advice, and take the next step towards being your own boss. Get your free tickets today at franchisetickets.co.uk.
This is the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry he wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time he hops on a bus. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings account.
Teaching shapes lives. If you're thinking of becoming a teacher, our expert teaching advisors can give you the level of support you need to get one step closer to the classroom. Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Search Get Into Teaching. Advisor support subject to eligibility.
The real reason Sleeping Beauty fell asleep was because it was taking so long for the palace to sell, and the handsome prince needed the proceeds to buy their new home with no time to dwell.
I know who can help. Property Rescue. I'll contact them straight away.
So he spoke to their friendly team who took care of every detail. They bought the palace direct with no legal fees to pay. Fast forward to living happily ever after. Visit propertyrescue.co.uk. Property Rescue. Fast forward to solve.
Critics adore BAFTA nominee David Copperfield.
This calls for a celebration.
It's impossible to resist, says The Guardian.
Tell me another.
It's wonderfully unexpected, says The Telegraph, featuring an all-star cast, including Dev Patel, Tilda Swinton, Hugh Laurie, Peter Capaldi, and Ben Whishaw.
It thrills me to the stomach.
David Copperfield in cinemas Friday.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 8:35. You're listening to Cross Question. You may be watching Cross Question on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, on the LBC website. Shaun is waving to you. We have with us in the studio Shaun Bailey, Conservative candidate for London Mayor, Steve Bloomfield, Deputy Editor for Prospect Magazine, Shabnam Nasimi, Conservative activist and Director of Conservative Friends of Afghanistan, and the broadcaster, and that's all I'm going to say, Trevor Phillips. Right, let's go. I'm going to do something different here. We've got a question from Ben in Clacton. I want you to each answer it within 60 seconds, because it's a slightly different kind of question, and then we're going to move on to Richard in Edgware. Ben, what would you like to ask?
Well, I've had an idea for some time about climate change and what we're doing about it, and putting like the bikes you've got in London and other cities. Why can't we have electric cars outside transport hubs in order to get round cities, both for tradespeople and for the ordinary member of the public to use? And it could be backed up by private finance from banks, etc., which are doing at the moment with the bikes. It's a very simple idea. I don't know why they haven't actually done it.
Okay, so we've had Boris bikes. Could we have Bailey cars, Shaun?
The short answer is yes, but first and foremost, the challenge in London is actually to reduce car ownership and the busyness on the roads. We have massive traffic problems. So actually, it's about good public transport. So you get good public transport. Particularly in the centre of London, it's possible to exist with no car. I think as you get further out and people need cars, you absolutely need to incentivise people to use car clubs, or we have these apps which you can just basically order a car when you need it. Anything that reduces car ownership, anything that reduces particulates being pumped into the air, I absolutely will have a look at. But the key thing is to stop those particulates entering in the first place, and the first place you start is with our buses, because they're the biggest single polluter across London, and you do that first.
Trevor.
I can do it in less than 60 seconds. It's going to happen probably within 20 years. We will park and ride. There will be driverless cars all over London.
Oh,
you won't be allowed to drive into London.
It's not a world I want to live in. Shabnam.
Why not? Why not, Ian?
Because I like driving. I don't want driverless cars. They're dangerous.
Well, go and drive in Kent or Norfolk or somewhere.
I do.
Fine. Don't drive in London.
But I have to, if I want to drive to London, to Norfolk, and I'm working, I have to come into London first to get out again.
If you go to Cambridge, you drive to Cambridge, you leave your car, you get on a park and ride bus.
Yeah.
You get used to it very quickly, mate.
Don't want to do it.
Shabnam. No, change is difficult. I completely agree. But I think in terms of completely cutting down on people driving, that is a long-term plan. That isn't going to happen very quickly. In terms of the electric cars, I do agree. I think it will happen, at least until the drastic change of getting people to actually cycle and use other forms of transportation more frequently. But electric cars, I do agree, will happen very soon.
Steve?
Electric cars are always floaters like, here's the answer, and they're just not. They'll make a bit of a difference, but actually Shaun's point is the most important one, is that we have to cut down on car use. For a start, on electric cars, there isn't enough cobalt in the world to make them. To make all the ones that we need, so that's a non-starter.
To make the batteries,
exactly, to make the batteries that you're going to need,
and that is why Tesla and everybody else is putting vast amounts of money into different, smaller, cheaper batteries.
Is still going to be a huge problem. And then you've got the problem, which is that even with all the changes that the government has promised, it's to stop selling petrol and diesel cars by 2040, which means there'll still be petrol and diesel cars on the road in 2050. In 2060, we need to get people out of cars. And it's a really, really difficult conversation to have. And it's quite refreshing to hear Shaun saying that.
People in the centre of London to say, if you live on the North Norfolk coast, believe me, you're not going to get out of your car.
That's why I was very careful to say where we can provide good public transport, such as in the centre of London, that has to be the goal. And as you get further out and car use is necessary, you'll have to do that. Because I think we'll get driverless cars, but I'm not as optimistic timetable as Trevor. But to be clear, we'll always have commercial traffic. So you're talking about the difference between unnecessary journeys and necessary journeys. You need to cut down immediately.
And London's very, very different from other cities as well. Like Birmingham, where I'm from, has a terrible public transport system.
You hide that well.
Yeah. Well, my dad's from London, so I grew up in Birmingham. If I'm there for longer, I'll sound more brummy. If you live in Leeds, it can sometimes be easier to walk from the suburbs to the cities than get a bus.
To ban cars from the centre of Brighton, which I think is a very brave move to make.
Birmingham's going to do it first.
Two points, but
very quickly.
With respect, people always say technology is going to take a lot longer. Most of us this year probably have been to an ATM less than half a dozen times. That's a change that's happened.
I don't use cash anymore. I'm like the Queen Mother.
Exactly, and that's happened within 24 months. Okay, it's going to take a bit longer. It's not going to be 3 years, but it might be 10 years. And I think your point about the rest of the country, though, is extremely important. Point I was making earlier on about, for example, coal mining towns. For decades, people have walked to work in those towns. The pits no longer exist, so they have to get in their cars and drive to some godforsaken industrial estate in the middle of nowhere or the nearest big towns. They will need cars. In London, we do not.
Okay. Ben, thank you for that. Rather more thought-provoking than I was imagining. Richard is in Edgware. You've got a very important question, Richard.
Hi, hello. I have a question for Shaun Bailey. My question was, if you were to become the Mayor of London, what plans would you have in place to actively counter knife and gun crime?
Right, well, we're obviously going to ask this to the rest of the panel as well, not just Shaun, but let's start off with you, Shaun.
So I think there's two things. You have to start with the tough bit. That means more police on the road. It means giving them the technology to do stop and search properly. It means making sure they're trained properly. But on the other end, if you really want to stop knife crime, you have to look at the constructive communities. You have to get people back into work. So I'm working on a second chance fund. So young people who've been through the system, haven't done something particularly serious, we can get them back into education so they can come back and get into work. And when I say education, I mean the broadest sense of it, vocational training, GCSEs, the rest of it, but make sure that those young people are not on the revolver in and out of jail the whole time, because they just get deeper and deeper into the problem as well. The other thing in what I'd really like to do is do something around probation. 2 reasons. When you educate people in jail, it brings it down, but also if you can help them out on the road to break some of the relationships they have, to keep going back to that relationship that keeps putting them into crime. But ultimately, and the first step is, we've got to make the streets of London safe. Currently, it is not safe to be in London. I was with a group of young boys probably about 4 months ago, and one of them said something very profound to me. He said, I spend more time working on my safety than I do on my future. We have to turn that around. There is no one silver bullet that will solve knife crime, but there's a number of things we can do, and the first thing we need to do is get someone to take responsibility.
That's quite something to say, that it's not safe in London. You sound like Donald Trump.
2 years in a row, we've had a record level of murders in London, homicides. 2 years in a row, not once. Not
that doesn't mean to say that it's not safe to be in London.
It does. A number of people feel like it isn't safe to be in London, and there's two things.
Well, that's different, though. You just said it is. That's different from feeling.
The effect is the same. And let me tell you something now. We've had a 39% rise in burglary, a 42% rise in knife crime. All of these things mean that it isn't safe. And if you're in some particular communities in London, it isn't safe, and people start to arm themselves.
But you are falling into Donald Trump's trap. He tries to make out that London isn't safe for Americans to go. You're actually backing him up there. That's a weird thing for a Conservative candidate to do. I know you're fighting Sadiq Khan, but you shouldn't be talking down your own city.
I've got nothing to do talking down my city. It's talking up the safety of Londoners. We've got to make this feeling safe. When people are saying to you they're more focused on their safety than their future, something has to be done about that. It has to be done. And remember, every time you hear of a knife crime, do you know the question I ask myself? How many other times was that knife used? What was it used for? Was it used to bully? Was it used to intimidate? I worry about these things because they change what it means to be a Londoner. No matter where you live in this town, if you ask someone, have they had a brush with crime, they'll tell you something about their children being robbed on the bus, or they've had a murder in their street. We've got to turn that around. London is only open when London is safe. This is the best place in the world, and it absolutely is.
Well, it clearly isn't if it isn't safe.
It clearly is, to my mind, the best place in the world. But the thing is, it needs to be significantly safer.
But you're arguing against yourself. How can you possibly say that London is the best place in the world, and on the other hand say, but it isn't safe?
Because we can turn it around. We've had spikes in crime before. The most important thing, we must not let this become our new norm. It must be battered down as hard as possible, because it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. If you feel unsafe, what does that do to your daily goings on? We can defeat this. That's why I say it's the best place in the world.
Bloomfield.
The one thing Shaun didn't mention there was money. If we want more police officers, that's going to cost money. We've lost 21,000 police officers in this country in the last 10 years. If we want better youth services, then we need more money. Every single council has had to cut their youth services. If we want to have better life chances for people, then we need to have more investment in schools. And again, we haven't seen the real terms rises that we've needed over the last 10 years. And you mentioned probation. We've just had this absolutely appalling privatisation process of probation, which has been an absolute disaster, so much that it's even then been rolled back. These are a series of steps that have been taken by your government over the last 10 years to take money out of some of these key services.
Yeah, but you forget one important point. People talk to me at the cuts all the time, and here's what I say: where did they come from? People never cut it because they like the idea of keeping the money. We had an economy that was devastated by a former Labour government and needed to be responded to. And to be clear,
do you
not think people are getting a bit bored of that?
To try and blame the Labour government for a global financial crisis.
No, they spent more.
Did the Labour government cause Lehman Brothers to go bust?
They spent more than we had. They effectively paid their rent with a credit card.
But your party's been in power now for 10 years.
Yeah, and this morning,
and your party chose to cut taxes for the rich rather than fund these services.
The Prime Minister announced money for policing on two separate occasions. The Mayor of London was offered extra money for policing. He took the money and was very slow to recruit. The first thing he did when he came to City Hall was remove money from the police staffing budget. The point is this: what happened in the past happened. We
What
need
happened? Yes,
to
it
do
did. It
Yes,
happened.
It happened.
And you should show some responsibility for what happened.
And I accept that. But what I don't accept is that we somehow had got in this situation without no influence from the Labour Party. They did what they did, and we had to respond to that. And what I'm talking about now
But why did
is
you
what
choose
do,
these cuts?
what
Why
you
did
do,
you choose these
what
cuts?
you
Why
do
not
now,
allow? Why not?
What you do now
raise taxes
is
on
what
rich
you
people?
do now is take charge with what you have. If the mayor was serious about crime in London, why did he increase his staff budget by £86 million when he could have done something about the crime of it?
Right.
He could have done something.
Shabnam and Trevor, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about your answers because we're going to go to a break. It's 8:47.
Eddie Mayer, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m.
Hi, Jeff. What do you think?
Royal family's all tradition should be gone.
How would you replace the royal family, Jeff? Wouldn't a whole bunch of politicians be involved?
We sold the crown jewels, do them and all.
No, but seriously, who would be head of state?
I'm being seriously.
Right, and so you'd have a president?
Well, we don't even really know.
Well, you're proposing getting rid of the monarchy. I'm asking what you'd replace it with.
Eddie Mayer, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Cut out carbs, reduce your fat, eat 5 a day, stretch, breathe, sleep. Squeeze, juice, crush, mix, blend, supplements 10 shelves deep, 50 kinds of yoga, 100 fruity teas. Kale, buckwheat, turmeric, are they really all good for me? Ask family, friends, the internet. Why, when, where, what, who? My head is spinning, confusion reigns. I no longer have a clue.
Getting the right health advice matters. So every day in January, you'll find essential Daily Mail good health features you won't want to miss.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Will the retirement you get be the retirement you want? Check your state pension and see how you can build on it with a workplace or other pension. Get to know your pension at yourpension.gov.uk.
We live in an age where you can stream any box set instantly. But staying on top of our pensions is anything but instant. Pension Bee can transfer most old pensions together into one simple online plan, so you can manage your pension on your smartphone as simply as streaming that box set. Download the app or visit pensionbee.com today.
Authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Capital at risk.
How can it be fair that millions of people in the world are denied access to clean water? At WaterAid, we need your help to create an equal world. Whether you're from Morden or Madagascar, everyone, everywhere should have access to clean water, because clean water changes lives. You can help WaterAid change the picture. To find out how, search WaterAid Radio now.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 10 to 9 here on LBC. You're listening to Cross Question with Shabnam Nasimi, Trevor Phillips, Shaun Bailey and Steve Bloomfield. We're in the middle of answering a question from Richard about knife crime. Trevor Phillips, when you were involved in London politics, I mean, knife crime was an issue, but why does it seem to have got so much worse?
Well, I'll tell you, I think, what's happening. By the way, the conversation that we're having, this is not to criticise my fellow panellists, but it's exactly an example of why people like Josh from Portsmouth think politics is a mess. Because actually, you guys were having a perfectly reasonable argument, but it wasn't about knife crime, actually. It's not about what people are actually worried about. Because when people talk about knife crime, they're talking about something very specific, and it's happening in this city. These are not just quarrels between kids. These are mass assassinations. It takes organisation to get a dozen people, teenagers, to chase somebody through a shopping centre and stab him and stab that particular individual, get the weapons there and so on. So we're talking about a very specific thing which is dangerous and ugly, and it is not going to be solved by more police officers. You'd have to have North Korean levels of police officers on the street to be where these things happen, because they're organised. So I think the first thing we've got to do is talk about what we're actually talking about. The second thing is we've got to be honest about who is dying and where. And this is one of the most difficult things. There are 2 young people dying every week in this city. Same rate as domestic violence, by the way, of killing of women. Almost all of them are black. Almost all of them are being killed by other black youngsters. And by the way, aside from the killings, there's thousands now, who are being stabbed and put in hospitals. And there's a big thing now about stabbing people in the anus, so they have to wear colostomy bags and humiliating them. Now, the reason I lay this out is that we need to talk about what is actually happening rather than the big politics. And because where it leads you is to focus, number one, on the communities at risk. And I'd be very interested to hear what Shabnam has to say about the Afghan community, because a lot of the kids involved here are kids who have come from war zones. And we have done nothing at all when they land here to help them find a way into society, to deal with the traumas that they've been through. We need to think about, and here is where I do think there's something about austerity, about the professions or the groups of people who previously would have intervened. I'm thinking, for example, in most of London's parks, we've got rid of the park keepers, who would have been people who would see, who would know where the gangs are and so on. We have too few school assistants. Michael Wilshaw, who was a head teacher in Mossbourne, cut the violence in Hackney, cut the violence with his kids because he put teachers on the streets that would escort children along the route to home. Now, we need to think about what's actually happening and the practical steps, rather than having a large political argument about whose fault it is.
Shabnam.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Trevor. More policing is one thing, but but the disconnect between actual communities, grassroots communities, the challenges that they have and the needs they have is something that's not been discussed. It's all, I guess, to some extent, political agendas and what will sell, rather than what are the challenges. And when it comes to a lot of the communities that I've worked with as well, is that we need to build community resilience. And in this respect, I would say local groups, local organisations that know their area particularly well, know their demographic, their beneficiaries more well. I think we need to be able to invest more in that. And I don't simply mean money, but more in terms of how do we build capacity to ensure that these groups, these youth centres, these organisations that support, for instance, young people from certain backgrounds, certain disadvantaged groups, how do we help them become more sustainable to be able to continue to run their services and their activities? Things like mentoring, getting someone to speak to once a week at least. I mean, it makes a huge difference. We simply think the challenge is that we think that policing is the only way to be able to cut gun crime and knife crime, but that's not the case. It's finding out where the problems are and getting someone to really meet with these families, meet with these kids, and see what other gaps within their lives there are that we could fill. And the other issue I find as well is that political correctness has also meant that we don't speak about these things anymore. I mean, you've got the Manchester grooming gangs that came up in the headlines last week, and it didn't get enough coverage as it should have. People are too scared.
It was headline news everywhere.
Yeah, but it's very interesting, Iain. It's very interesting. For the first time last week, literally for the first time, and I know this because I'm partly responsible for this change, the BBC said these were principally British Asians.
Yeah, and that was wrong. They shouldn't have done
the point
that.
I was going to make, exactly the point I was going to make. But they were so anxious about it, they couldn't quite get to, These are largely British Pakistani
Exactly.
Muslims.
Hold on,
Well, we didn't have any of that on my show.
I know
can
you
tell
don't have that problem.
And we covered that. We did a 2-hour phone-in on that. You might say, well, that was one night, but it's seriously. I was leading all the websites, all the news programs.
But Sheldon's point is a very. I think it's a really important one, because generally speaking, the media has not been able to bring itself to say this is where this is concentrated. Nobody can actually put the resources where it's supposed to be.
Just before you go on, Shaun, I just want to read out a text here and comment on this. It's kind of allied to what we've been discussing. This is from Tony in Tuscany. Sad to say this, but who really cares if 100 young black guys get stabbed and killed? Just note the difference when 2 young white folks were knifed in Fishmongers Hall, wall-to-wall TV and media coverage for 4 days, memorial services with Boris, Jeremy and other dignitaries, national outcry and endless drama. The young blacks got none of that because they were black.
Well, let me be quite clear. I personally am very upset about that for obvious reasons. But let's go deep then. If we take this thing, firstly and foremostly, if you really want to get into communities, you've got to stop infantilising them and suggesting that only the services can look after their children. You need to go down to families. I come from a very poor community. Very few of us had anything to do with crime, but the ones who did really went for it. This idea that we have to keep pouring people in, actually what we need to do is keep supporting families. That's what makes the real difference. And let me take this point about policing. I'm afraid I disagree, Trevor, because it does make a difference. If you're going to say who's going to speak to these people, we're not policing them. It's the police who speak to these people. It's the police who have the authority, to police to take time. Local policing makes an impact on the culture. That's the important thing. The thing that we need to change here is the culture. And when people see police, it is a measured fact. It lowers the crime in an area. A good local copper can have conversations with young people that are life-changing to them. That's why I talk about extra policing. That's why I say, and also as well, a police force that has more human resource is less stretched, is more calm, and can keep a given area calmer because they as individuals are calm. It's never only been about the police. 25 years of youth has shown me it's not about the police. But right here in London, with a growing population, we need more police officers to help us keep London.
And it's interesting. It's interesting, though, that actually in this conversation we have all said pretty similar things about the fact that more needs to be done, and that it can't just be a top-down thing. It has to happen in communities, but it also costs money. And that's the one thing that we've been avoiding over the last 10 years, is that these things cost money.
The question is, what is the it? I grew up in an N22, North London, Wood Green postcode. The average number of violent crimes across London in postcode is 26. In that postcode, in 2018, it was 226. No number of police are going to solve that, because they organise things so the police aren't there. We've got to deal with it, look at it differently, Shaun.
Well, we could carry on this, and I apologise to Adam and Shuvik who wanted to ask questions, but I thought it was important to have a longer discussion on that subject. It's one that I've been discussing on LBC ever since I've been on the station for 10 years, and we don't seem to be any nearer the answer than we were 10 years ago, which is a slightly depressing note to end on.
But we won't ask the right question.
Shabnam Nasimi, Trevor Phillips, Shaun Bailey and Steve Bloomfield, thank you very much for joining us. You can catch up if you missed any of the programme. It'll be on the Cross Question podcast in about an hour's time, and you can catch it up also on YouTube. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 9 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock. The Foreign Office has advised against all but essential travel to Wuhan in China after the outbreak of a respiratory illness. The city is at the centre of a coronavirus